Astro deserved so much better than what this movie gave him. In the original, Astro knew he was a robot. He had emotions like loyalty to his fellow robot and a genuine desire to do good. But in the movie, Astro seems clueless about being a robot. He doesn't know he can fly, and he's completely unaware of his own weapon system. At one point, he says, "I've got machine guns in my butt." It made me laugh, but honestly, it felt out of place. This new version of Astro feels like every other good kid character in a typical children's movie, surrounded by cute characters he's supposed to bond with. Between all the explosions and over-the-top destruction, the film manages to hit every robot and superhero cliche you can think of, and even goes beyond that. And then there's Nicolas Cage. He plays the father who loses his son and then rejects another, but with his usual lack of emotional range, it just doesn't land. It all felt like too much of a mess. I couldn't connect with any of the characters or the story. May comes off as a violent jerk, her mom is unbearable, and the villain is just bad. I get that May's supposed to be angry, but she spends most of the movie being aggressive and selfish toward everyone. Even the friendly robot isn't spared. He tells her that his memory is limited, and if he fills up, he'll basically die. Her response? She barely reacts and keeps using him as a weapon, even though he clearly doesn't want to. How are they supposed to be friends? It feels so one-sided. I felt like I was supposed to like May and excuse her behavior because of what she's been through. But that sympathy wasn't earned. She's just an awful kid, and somehow she's the protagonist. The plot was a mess too. It kept jumping around, from May's personal struggles and dealing with her bully, to an evil villain with some over-the-top plan. It felt like a rip-off of other films, with no real focus or direction. I just couldn't get into it. Robots kind of reminds me of B-movie. It's rich in meme material, but as a standalone movie, it's pretty forgettable and generic. My friends and I joke about this all the time. If you really think about the themes, the movie is actually kind of dark. Imagine if it were about humans instead of robots. Machines roam the streets at night, sweeping up and harvesting the organs of the poor and homeless, because they're considered eyesores. In Cars, they never explain where the cars come from. But in Robots, they show that robots are literally built, and they can replace most of their body parts as they grow. That concept alone is kind of wild. The humor is also worth mentioning. There are plenty of jokes for the kids, but there's also some clever stuff for the adults. They even throw in some funny uses of pop music from the time, plus a couple of original songs. Overall, the movie isn't the most original in terms of plot, but it does offer some positive messages for kids, and the visual style is unique enough to make it stand out a little more. Meet the Robinsons is such a great movie, but it doesn't get the love it deserves. Here's why I think it's a hidden gem. The characters are totally wacky and over the top, but they're so much fun to watch that you just want to keep going with them. It's surprisingly emotional too. You really start to feel for Lewis, the main character, as he struggles to find his place. And come on, it's got Adam West. Most movies that take us to the future are just okay, but in this one, the future is colorful and full of life. It really draws you in, and I love the message. You can't keep focusing on yesterday's mistakes. You have to keep moving forward. It's such a simple idea, but so many people get stuck in the past, worrying about their failures, when they should be thinking about what's next and how they can grow. Now, I will say, the middle of the movie feels a bit scattered. For a solid 30 minutes, it's just random introductions to quirky characters, each one more outrageous than the last. And then it's on to the next. It's fun, but doesn't really move the story forward. I feel like it either needed a bit more plot, or just could have been shorter overall. The villain reveal was way too obvious, so that part fell flat for me. The cast also felt underused. But honestly, Baymax kind of makes up for it. He's hilarious, and the movie is pretty funny overall. He reminds me of the genie in Aladdin, the big friendly sidekick who helps save the day. But instead of Robin Williams' crazy impression, Baymax's charm comes from being the total opposite. He's simple, straightforward, and his deadpan delivery is what makes him so funny. Almost like Jeff Bridges in Starman. He's so innocent, which just makes his reactions and goofy moments even better. The animation is stunning, with rich colors, detailed backgrounds, and character designs that are sweet without being too sugary. It's one of the best-looking Disney films in recent years, no doubt. In the end, it's a solid movie with gorgeous animation, clever writing, a well-crafted cast of characters, and a unique setting. Treasure Planet is hella underrated though. It has a few rough edges, both in the plot and the animation, but the people who made it put a lot of work into it. The production design alone rivals that of some great live-action sci-fi movie. There are moments of joy and pathos throughout, and it's interesting to see a science fiction twist on a classic pirate story. It was literally my childhood film, and I still love watching it now. The movie tackles so many themes while keeping its priority on the theme of finding yourself. It's one of the few animated films of its time that doesn't aim to have the main protagonist fall in love. Instead, it focuses on his journey. That's what I love about it. He wants to make his mother proud and show her that he is capable of doing the right thing. Transformers 1 is anything but a cliché. It doesn't fall into the typical good versus evil storyline we see in so many films. Instead, it offers a genuinely captivating story. We finally get to see what Optimus and Megatron were like as ordinary robots, giving us a glimpse into their personalities before they became legend. The animation is absolutely stunning. It feels so real, with just the right amount of exaggeration, almost to the point where it doesn't feel like animation at all. The cinematography is impressive, especially during the battle scene, which are captured beautifully. I did notice that in 3D, some parts can blur a bit, making it tricky to take in all the details, but overall, it's still an enjoyable experience. The opening scene is just fantastic. It beautifully symbolizes the process of birth, done in a way that's both artistic and deeply meaningful. I also loved the moment when Motoko looks at her own reflection in the water. The way it acts like a gradient really captures her internal struggle. You can feel her fear of being two separate entities. The film does an amazing job exploring the question, is there a ghost in the shell? One of my favorite examples of this is the conversation between Batu and Motoko on the boat. It really highlights that theme perfectly. It's definitely worth watching for the visuals alone. Sony is really stepping up their game with animated films. The movie doesn't lean too heavily on pop culture references, and the few it does include, like the nods to Kill Bill, are subtle enough that if you miss them, you won't feel like you've missed anything important. The animation is impressive, with great character designs, and the voice cast does a solid job throughout. The characters range from charmingly hysterical to surprisingly relatable. I found it funny that the robots could have easily wiped out humanity through warfare, but instead, they decided to take everyone captive, launch them into space, and insult them the entire time. I really appreciate that level of pettiness. Sometimes, while watching an animated feature, I catch myself saying, "What great animation!" It makes me wonder if that's what the producers intended. Should I really be so captivated by the technical side of the movie that I get distracted from the actual content? When I watched The Iron Giant, I realized I'd forgotten it was an animated film. Don't get me wrong, I knew the huge title character was animated, but the relationships between the characters and the cleverness of the script made me forget they weren't real actors. The movie is filled with touching moments, especially when it comes to our feelings about mortality. I love that the adults aren't just your typical bad guys. Even the military, which is usually shown as the villain, finds itself in a tricky spot, having to go on faith. The animation is fantastic, but the performances really stand out too. No spoilers here, but I think the ending beautifully pays tribute to the spirit of life in all of us, even those of us not made of metal. You definitely need to see this. It's one of the best movies of the year, and I can't help but share this quote from Brad Bird about why The Iron Giant didn't do well at the box office. "I guess there wasn't a market for movies that make 40-year-old men cry. That seems totally in character for DreamWorks. They really do lap the competition every couple of years. They created the best Disney Renaissance movie with The Prince of Egypt, the best fairy tale movie with Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, the best superhero movie with Megamind, and now they've given us the best Pixar movie with Wild Robot, according to author Peter Brown. The inspiration for the wild robot came from a sketch he did of a robot in a tree. He then asked himself, what would an intelligent robot do in the wilderness? With its brisk 100-minute runtime, Robot doesn't have many lulls or slow moments. Roz's journey of self-discovery, along with her relationships with new friends and her exploration of what it means to truly care and love beyond her programming, takes us on a familiar yet unique adventure. You never feel like it's just checking boxes on the way to crafting a memorable experience. It's engaging enough to keep you cheering, laughing, and probably crying throughout. The film's core themes of technology, climate, survival, and emotional depth really set it apart, making it a standout among all the animated films released this year.